Welcome to StorySpin. Today's theme is petty revenge, and honestly, sometimes the smallest acts of vengeance are the most satisfying. We're diving into 5 stories of people who decided that living well wasn't enough revenge. They needed to get creative. First up, my upstairs neighbor kept me awake for months, so I made sure he never slept again. Let's spin it. I'm a 28-year-old guy living in an apartment complex. For 8 months, my upstairs neighbor has been stomping around at all hours. I'm talking 2 a.m. workouts, rearranging furniture at midnight, and what sounds like bowling practice in his living room. I tried talking to him. I tried the landlord. Nothing worked. This guy would literally stomp harder after I complained. So I did some research. Turns out my neighbor works the night shift at a hospital. He gets home around 7 a.m. and sleeps until 4 p.m. Perfect. I bought a subwoofer. Not just any subwoofer, a 1,000-watt monster that I placed directly on the ceiling, pointing up at his bedroom floor. Every day at 7:30 a.m., I'd start my morning workout playlist. Heavy bass, electronic music, the works. I'd leave it on until about 2 p.m., then give him a couple hours of peace before starting my afternoon cleaning session with more bass-heavy music. Within a week, he was pounding on my door, screaming about the noise. I very politely explained that some people are just naturally noisy during their active hours, and maybe he should invest in earplugs. The beauty? Everything I was doing was completely legal. Noise ordinances in our building only applied after 10 p.m. and before 7 a.m. 3 weeks later, he moved out. As his moving truck pulled away, I made sure to be standing on my balcony, subwoofer clearly visible, giving him a friendly wave. The new upstairs neighbor, a lovely elderly woman who wears slippers and apologizes if she makes even a little bit of noise. Sometimes the best revenge is a taste of your own medicine, served with a side of perfect timing. Next up, my coworker kept stealing my lunch, so I gave him exactly what he deserved. This one's delicious. I work in a typical office environment, and for 3 months, someone kept stealing my lunch from the fridge. Not just taking bites, completely eating my entire meal. I'd come to the break room to find my container empty in the sink, washed clean like nothing happened. I tried labeling my food, using different containers, even hiding it behind other items. Nothing worked. Then I figured out who it was. Jake from accounting. I caught him red-handed one day, fork in my leftover pasta, completely shameless. When I confronted him, he just shrugged it off and acted like it was no big deal. That's when I decided Jake needed a lesson in consequences. I spent the next week preparing. I made my usual lunch, a beautiful chicken sandwich with all the fixings. But this time, I infused it with ghost pepper sauce, not just a little drizzle. I'm talking about enough to make Satan himself cry. I mixed it into the mayo, spread it on the bread, and even injected some into the chicken with a syringe. The sandwich looked completely normal, but one bite would send someone straight to flavor hell. I put it in the fridge with my usual label and waited. Around noon, I heard screaming from the break room. Jake was at the sink, frantically chugging milk, his face redder than a tomato. He was crying, actual tears streaming down his face. The entire office gathered to watch as he gargled with coffee creamer and begged someone to call poison control. I walked in, very concerned, and asked what happened. Through his tears, Jake managed to explain that someone had poisoned the food in the fridge. I gasped and said, "Oh no, that was my lunch. I have a severe stomach condition and need extremely spicy food in order to aid digestion. I'm so sorry you ate my medical food." The HR director, who'd been watching the whole thing, just nodded and reminded everyone about the company policy against stealing food. Jake never touched my lunch again. In fact, he started bringing his own lunch in a locking cooler. The irony of locking up his own lunch after the fact. Sheesh. This next revenge plays out over time, and it's oh so satisfying. My ex kept parking in my assigned spot, so I made sure he'd never forget where he parked again. I'm a 25-year-old woman who recently broke up with my boyfriend of 2 years. We lived in the same apartment complex, and I had a covered parking spot that I paid extra for. After we broke up, this guy, let's call him Brad, decided he could just keep using my spot whenever he wanted. His reasoning? We dated for 2 years, I practically lived there. I asked him to stop. I left notes. I even had the apartment management send him a formal notice. Nothing worked. This entitled jerk would park his precious BMW in my spot and text me things like, "Sue me," and "What are you gonna do about it?" Well, Brad, I'm glad you asked. I work at a vet clinic and we use a lot of interesting supplies. I started small. Every time I found his car in my spot, I'd leave a little gift. Fish oil under the door handles. Liquid skunk spray in the air vents. Once, I even managed to get some fox urine, we use it for wildlife deterrent, into his cabin air filter. Brad would show up to work smelling like a seafood market mixed with a sewage plant. He'd wash his car, detail it, even took it to professional cleaners. But every time he parked in my spot, something new would happen. I had an entire arsenal of veterinary-grade stink at my disposal. The best part? I was always careful to only target his car when it was illegally parked in my spot. If he parked anywhere else, I left him alone. I was training him like a particularly slow dog. After 3 weeks of this, Brad finally snapped. He started parking 2 blocks away and walking to his apartment. But here's where it gets really good. I wasn't done. See, Brad had been telling everyone at his work and our friend group that I was crazy and obsessed with him. He painted himself as the victim of a psycho ex-girlfriend. So for the grand finale, I waited until he was hosting a party at his place. I knew he'd invite our mutual friends, including some people I genuinely cared about who deserved to know the truth. I made a beautiful poster board with photos of his car illegally parked in my spot, screenshots of his "sue me" texts, and a timeline of events. I laminated it and left it on his door where everyone arriving for the party would see it. The title read, "A Visual History of Why Brad Smells Like Dead Fish." By the time the party was over, 3 people had texted me laughing about it, and Brad had exactly 0 sympathy for his situation. He moved out of the complex 2 months later. I heard through the grapevine that he told people he needed a fresh start. I still park in my assigned spot every day, and it still smells like victory. Our next story comes from someone who discovered that customer service works both ways. My cable company kept me on hold for hours, so I made sure they got a taste of their own medicine. I'm a 34-year-old freelance graphic designer who works from home. My internet is literally my lifeline. When my cable company's service went down for the 3rd time in a month, I called to complain. They put me on hold for 4 hours. 4 hours. I couldn't work, couldn't take other calls, couldn't do anything except listen to that awful loop of elevator music and, "Your call is important to us." When I finally got through, the representative was rude, dismissive, and basically told me it was my fault for not having a backup internet plan. That's when I realized something beautiful. I had a lot of free time on my hands, and they had given me their direct customer service number. I started calling back. Not just once or twice, I called back every single day for a month. But here's the twist. I wasn't calling to complain. I was calling to be the world's most enthusiastic customer. "Hi, I just wanted to call and tell you how much I love your service today. It's working perfectly, and I wanted to make sure you knew how happy I am." I'd keep them on the line for 20 to 30 minutes, asking detailed questions about their day, their training, whether they were getting enough breaks. I'd call during their busiest hours and tie up their lines with pure, weaponized positivity. "I'm just so grateful for your service. Can you transfer me to your supervisor so I can tell them how wonderful you are?" And then I'd spend another 20 minutes telling the supervisor how amazing their employee was, how the company was the best, how I'd never consider switching providers. The beauty was that they couldn't hang up on me. I wasn't being rude or abusive. I was being the perfect customer, just an extremely talkative one who called every single day during peak hours. After 2 weeks, I got a call from a manager asking if everything was okay and if there was anything specific I needed help with. I very cheerfully explained that I was just so happy with their service that I wanted to make sure they knew. The manager paused for a long moment and then said, "Sir, we really appreciate your enthusiasm, but you don't need to call us every day to tell us you're happy." "Oh, but I do," I replied. "After that 4-hour hold time last month, I realized how hard you all work, and I just want to make sure you know how much I appreciate it." There was another long pause. Then the manager said, "About that hold time, we'd like to offer you 3 months of free service as an apology for the inconvenience. I graciously accepted and mentioned that I'd probably continue calling to share my positive feedback, just maybe not every day. Maybe every few days, I suggested cheerfully. They upgraded my service plan for free and gave me a direct number for technical support that bypasses the hold queue. I called one more time after that, just to thank them for the excellent customer service. The representative who answered actually laughed and said, "You're the guy who calls every day, aren't you?" When I confirmed, she said, "We have a note in your file that says VIP customer, resolve immediately." Sometimes killing them with kindness works better than any complaint ever could. And finally, let's end with a story that proves revenge doesn't always have to be elaborate. Sometimes it's just about perfect timing and a little bit of creativity. My neighbor complained about my garden, so I made sure he got exactly what he asked for. I'm a 45-year-old homeowner who loves gardening. My backyard is my pride and joy. Vegetables, herbs, flowers, the works. It's completely on my property, well-maintained, and actually increases the neighborhood's property values. My neighbor, however, hated it. He thought gardens were messy and attracted pests. He complained to the homeowners association, the city, anyone who would listen. He wanted me to remove my garden and replace it with nice, clean grass. The HOA investigated and found I wasn't violating any rules. The city confirmed everything was legal, but this guy wouldn't let it go. He started leaving passive-aggressive notes on my door about neighborhood standards, and even had the audacity to suggest I was bringing down everyone's property values. The final straw was when he told my wife at the grocery store that some people just don't understand how to be good neighbors. He was constantly voicing his opinion about my garden, and it eventually got to me. So I gave him exactly what he wanted. I removed my beautiful garden and replaced it with grass. But not just any grass. I planted the most aggressive, fast-growing variety I could find. The kind that spreads like wildfire and requires constant maintenance. Then I stopped maintaining it. Within 6 weeks, my nice clean grass had grown into a 3-foot-tall jungle that was spreading into his precious manicured lawn. The seeds were blowing into his flower beds, and the roots were creeping under the fence. This guy was out there every weekend with a weed whacker, trying to keep his yard from being invaded by the grass he specifically requested I plant. Turns out, a garden wasn't so bad after all, especially compared to wild grass. After 2 months of this, he knocked on my door with a desperate look in his eyes. "Would you consider, maybe, putting your garden back?" he asked. "The grass is getting a little out of control." I looked at him with genuine confusion and said, "But I thought you wanted nice, clean grass. This is exactly what you asked for." He started explaining how maybe a small garden wouldn't be so bad, and how he never realized how much work grass could be. I nodded sympathetically and told him I'd think about it. The next weekend, I was back out there with my shovel and seed packets, replanting my beautiful garden while he watched from his window with visible relief. The best part? He now compliments my tomatoes every time he sees me and even asked for gardening advice. That's 5 stories of deliciously petty revenge, served cold, hot, and sometimes extra spicy. Subscribe if you believe in the power of creative problem solving, and let me know in the comments which revenge was the most satisfying. Until next time, remember, sometimes the best revenge is just being better at being petty than the other person.